An experienced electrician was called for emergency repairs in the basement of a renowned hospital. What he discovered in the underground corridors and restricted rooms changed his perception of modern medicine forever. Illegal experiments, missing patients, and a conspiracy involving the city's most respected doctors. This is the real story of how some institutions that should save lives can hide humanity's darkest secrets. Leave in the comments, would you have the courage to expose crimes, even knowing it would destroy your career? Chapter 1. Dave Mitchell had been working with electrical systems for 21 years, but hospital work had always been his specialty. At 44 years old, he was one of the region's most trusted electricians for medical facilities, where a single electrical failure could mean the difference between life and death for patients depending on life support systems. Living in a comfortable two-story house with his wife Linda, whom he had married 18 years ago, and their two children, 15-year-old Alex and 12-year-old Sophie, Dave had built a reputation for reliability and expertise that made him the first call when hospitals faced electrical emergencies. Dave's workshop in his garage was filled with specialized equipment designed for medical facility work. Isolation testers, ground fault analyzers, and precision multimeters that could detect the subtle electrical problems that might not affect normal buildings, but could be catastrophic in environments where people's lives depended on consistent power delivery. His expertise extended beyond basic electrical work to include the complex systems that modern hospitals required. Emergency generators, uninterruptible power supplies, medical equipment isolation circuits, and the sophisticated monitoring systems that ensured patient safety in critical care units. Recently, Dave had been exploring ways to expand his business beyond service calls to include custom electrical installations for specialized applications. He had been studying advanced techniques through TED's woodworking, which included comprehensive guides for skilled tradesmen looking to develop premium services that commanded higher rates than standard electrical work. The emergency call that would change Dave's life came on a Tuesday evening while he was having dinner with his family. The voice on the phone belonged to Dr. Patricia Vega, the chief administrator of St. Mary's Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical facilities in the region. Mr. Mitchell, we have a critical electrical emergency in our basement level. Our backup power systems are experiencing failures that could affect patient safety. We need someone with your expertise here immediately. St. Mary's Hospital was a sprawling complex that had been expanded multiple times over its 50-year history. The original building had been supplemented with new wings, additional floors, and upgraded facilities that made it one of the most comprehensive medical centers in the state. Dave arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes of Dr. Vega's call, carrying the specialized equipment necessary to diagnose complex electrical problems in medical environments. The hospital's basement level was a maze of mechanical rooms, storage areas, and utility corridors that housed the infrastructure necessary to keep a modern medical facility operational. Dr. Vega met Dave at the hospital's main entrance and personally escorted him to the basement level, which required using her administrative keycard to access areas that were restricted to authorized personnel only. The problem seems to be concentrated in the lower basement area, Dr. Tadru Vega explained as they descended in a service elevator. Our monitoring systems are showing power fluctuations that could affect critical care equipment, but our regular maintenance staff hasn't been able to identify the source. The basement level Dave encountered was unlike any hospital infrastructure he had worked with before. Beyond the normal mechanical rooms and storage areas, there were corridors that led to sections of the building that didn't appear on any of the architectural plans he had reviewed during previous work at St. Mary's. Dave's initial assessment of the electrical systems revealed problems that were both more complex and more suspicious than typical equipment failures. The power distribution panels showed evidence of unauthorized modifications, with additional circuits that had been installed without proper documentation or inspection. Most puzzling were the electrical loads that Dave detected in areas of the basement that were supposed to be used only for storage and building maintenance. The power consumption patterns suggested the operation of sophisticated equipment that would have no legitimate purpose in unused areas of a hospital basement. Dr. Vega, Dave said as he reviewed his initial findings, some of these electrical circuits are carrying loads that don't match the building plans. There's equipment operating in areas that are supposed to be empty storage rooms. Dr. Vega's response was both evasive and oddly defensive. Mr. Mitchell, this is a large hospital with many specialized functions. We have research equipment and medical devices throughout the facility that might not be obvious to someone unfamiliar with our operations. But Dave's experience with hospital electrical systems told him that something was fundamentally wrong with what he was observing. The power requirements he was detecting suggested the operation of major medical equipment in areas where no such equipment should exist. As Dave continued his investigation of the electrical problems, he began to notice other irregularities that had nothing to do with power systems, but everything to do with the hospital's operations. Corridors that were marked as restricted areas but showed evidence of regular foot traffic. Storage rooms that were equipped with sophisticated ventilation systems typically used for laboratory work. Most disturbing were the sounds that Dave could hear coming from behind locked doors in areas that were supposed to be unused. The rhythmic beeping of medical monitors, the hum of life support equipment, and what sounded like muffled human voices in distress. Dave's curiosity about the hospital's unusual basement operations was heightened when he encountered Dr. Marcus Webb, the hospital's chief of surgery, in an area that was supposedly restricted to maintenance personnel. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Webb said with obvious surprise and displeasure, "I wasn't aware that our electrical problems required access to this section of the basement." "I'm following the power circuits to identify the source of the failures," Dave replied. "Some of the problems seem to originate from equipment in these restricted areas." Dr. Webb's expression grew cold. "I think you'll find that the electrical problems are limited to the main mechanical areas. There's no need for you to investigate these research sections." But Dave had already seen enough to know that something was happening in the hospital's basement that went far beyond legitimate medical research. The electrical requirements he was detecting, combined with the evidence of ongoing activities in supposedly unused areas, suggested operations that were being deliberately concealed from normal hospital oversight. That evening, Dave returned home with questions that he couldn't answer, and suspicions that he didn't want to believe. Over dinner with Linda and the children, he found himself thinking about the sounds he had heard behind locked doors and the defensive reactions of the hospital staff when he had tried to investigate electrical problems in certain areas. "Dave, you look troubled," Linda observed as they cleaned up after dinner. "Was there something unusual about today's emergency call?" Dave hesitated before answering, knowing that sharing his suspicions might drag his family into something dangerous. But he also knew that he couldn't ignore what he had observed at St. Mary's Hospital. "I think there might be something happening at that hospital that isn't part of their normal medical operations," Dave said carefully. "The electrical systems suggest equipment and activities that don't match what should be happening in those areas." Linda knew her husband well enough to understand that his concerns were based on professional expertise rather than imagination. Dave's 21 years of experience with hospital electrical systems had given him an intimate understanding of how medical facilities should operate. "What kind of activities?" Linda asked. "I don't know yet," Dave replied. "But I think I need to find out." The decision to investigate further would prove to be the most dangerous choice of Dave's career, but it would also lead to the exposure of medical crimes that had been hidden for years behind the reputation of one of the region's most trusted hospitals. Chapter 2. Dave's return to St. Mary's Hospital the following day was ostensibly to complete the electrical repairs he had begun, but his real purpose was to investigate the suspicious activities he had detected in the hospital's restricted basement areas. The power problems provided legitimate cover for accessing areas where he could gather more information about what was really happening behind locked doors. Dr. Vega had assigned Dave a hospital security escort, ostensibly for safety reasons, but clearly intended to monitor his activities and prevent him from investigating areas that the hospital administration wanted to keep hidden. "Mr. Mitchell," said Officer Reynolds, the security guard who would accompany Dave, "Dr. Vega has asked me to ensure that you have everything you need to complete your electrical work efficiently. She's also asked that we focus on the main mechanical areas and avoid unnecessary delays in research sections." But Dave's professional expertise gave him legitimate reasons to access areas throughout the basement, and his years of experience in hospital electrical systems allowed him to identify valid technical justifications for investigating the power consumption patterns he had detected. Using his specialized equipment to trace electrical circuits, Dave began mapping the basement's power distribution in ways that revealed the true scope of the hidden operations. The electrical loads he documented showed that major medical equipment was operating in areas that were officially designated as unused storage space. More disturbing was Dave's discovery that some of the basement areas had been modified with electrical systems designed to support operations that required isolation from the hospital's main monitoring networks. These were power systems that could operate without appearing on the hospital's central electrical monitoring displays. During his lunch break, Dave managed to separate from Officer Reynolds long enough to investigate one of the locked areas where he had detected high power consumption. Using techniques he had learned for accessing electrical panels in restricted areas, Dave gained entry to a section of the basement that was supposed to be permanently closed. What he found behind the locked door was a fully equipped surgical suite that was operating independently of the hospital's official surgical departments. The room contained sophisticated medical equipment, monitoring systems, and surgical instruments that were clearly being used for active medical procedures. But perhaps most disturbing was the evidence that the surgical suite was being used for procedures that would never appear in official hospital records. Dave found disposal containers for medical waste that suggested surgical activities involving multiple patients, but there were no patient charts, consent forms, or other documentation that would normally accompany legitimate medical procedures. The electrical systems Dave examined in the hidden surgical suite revealed that it was designed to operate completely independently of the hospital's main electrical and monitoring networks. Power consumption, equipment operation, and even basic lighting could be controlled without creating any records in the hospital's central systems. Dave realized that he had discovered a facility within the hospital that was designed to conduct medical procedures in complete secrecy, without any of the oversight, documentation, or patient protection measures that governed legitimate hospital operations. Over the next 2 days, Dave continued his electrical work while secretly documenting the hidden facilities he was discovering throughout the hospital's basement. His investigation revealed not just one secret surgical suite, but an entire network of concealed medical facilities that were operating parallel to the hospital's official operations. The basement contained hidden laboratories where medical research was being conducted without the oversight that governed legitimate clinical trials. Dave found evidence of pharmaceutical testing, experimental surgical procedures, and medical research that violated every principle of patient consent and safety that guided ethical medical practice. Most shocking was Dave's discovery of patient holding areas where people were being kept in conditions that resembled imprisonment more than medical care. The electrical systems in these areas included monitoring equipment for multiple patients, but Dave found no evidence of the charts, consent forms, or family notification procedures that would accompany legitimate medical treatment. Dave began to understand that St. Mary's Hospital was using its reputation and infrastructure to conduct illegal medical experiments on vulnerable patients who had no advocates or family members to question their treatment. The hidden facilities were designed to allow doctors to conduct research and procedures that would never be approved by medical ethics boards or regulatory agencies. But Dave also realized that his investigation was taking place under dangerous circumstances. The hospital staff who were involved in the illegal operations would not tolerate exposure by an electrician who had gained access to their hidden facilities through legitimate maintenance work. It was during his 4th day at the hospital that Dave encountered Dr. Marcus Webb in one of the hidden laboratories, surrounded by medical equipment that was clearly being used for unauthorized research. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Webb said with barely controlled anger, "I thought we had established that your electrical work should be limited to the main mechanical areas." "I'm tracing power circuits that are affecting the hospital's main electrical systems," Dave replied, trying to maintain the pretense that his presence was purely professional. "Some of the problems originate from equipment in these research areas." Dr. Webb studied Dave's face with the calculation of someone trying to determine how much a potential threat knew about operations that needed to remain secret. "Mr. Mitchell, I think there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of your work here. These research facilities require specialized clearance and confidentiality agreements that haven't been arranged for your visit." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 2 other men, who clearly were not medical personnel. Their bearing and the way Dr. Webb deferred to them suggested that the illegal operations at St. Mary's Hospital involved people who were willing to use violence to protect their secrets. Dave realized that he had been discovered investigating operations that powerful people would kill to keep hidden. The question was whether he could complete his documentation and escape the hospital before the people involved in the illegal medical experiments decided that his knowledge made him too dangerous to allow to live. What do you think about Dave's discovery? Should he have reported his suspicions immediately, or was he right to gather more evidence first? Leave your opinion in the comments about how you would handle finding such horrific medical crimes in a trusted hospital. Chapter 3. Dave's discovery that he was under surveillance by people who were clearly not hospital staff made it impossible for him to continue his investigation openly. The men who had appeared during his confrontation with Dr. Webb had the bearing of security personnel who were prepared to use violence to protect the hospital's illegal operations. But Dave also understood that simply walking away from St. Mary's Hospital would not ensure his safety. He had already seen enough evidence of illegal medical experiments to pose a threat to operations that appeared to involve millions of dollars and the reputations of some of the region's most prominent physicians. Over the next 2 days, Dave completed his legitimate electrical work while secretly documenting the evidence he had gathered about the hospital's hidden facilities. Using his phone camera and specialized electrical testing equipment, Dave recorded proof of the secret surgical suites, unauthorized laboratories, and patient holding areas that were operating without any oversight or patient protection. The evidence Dave gathered painted a picture of systematic medical abuse that violated both federal law and international standards for human experimentation. The hidden facilities were being used to conduct pharmaceutical testing, experimental surgical procedures, and medical research on patients who had never consented to participate in such activities. Most disturbing was Dave's discovery that the illegal experiments were targeting vulnerable populations who had no family members or advocates to question their treatment. The patient-holding areas contained evidence that homeless individuals, people with mental disabilities, and undocumented immigrants were being used as unwilling subjects for medical research that would never be approved by legitimate oversight bodies. Dave's investigation also revealed that the illegal operations were financially supported by pharmaceutical companies and research organizations that were paying the hospital to conduct studies that couldn't be performed through legitimate clinical trials. The hidden facilities allowed them to bypass safety regulations and ethical oversight that protected patients in legal medical research. But perhaps most shocking was Dave's discovery that the illegal medical experiments had been operating for several years, suggesting that hundreds of vulnerable patients had been subjected to unauthorized procedures that had caused unknown numbers of injuries and deaths. During this period of secret investigation, Dave found himself thinking about the principles of integrity and professional responsibility that he had been learning through his study of advanced business practices. The Ted's Wood working materials he had been reviewing emphasized the importance of skilled professionals maintaining ethical standards, even when faced with pressure from clients or employers who wanted to compromise those standards. The contrast between the ethical business practices outlined in his studies and the systematic criminality he was witnessing at St. Mary's Hospital reinforced Dave's determination to expose the illegal medical experiments, regardless of the personal risks involved. Dave's plan for exposing the medical crimes while protecting his family required coordination with law enforcement agencies that were not compromised by the hospital's influence. His research into the hospital's operations had revealed that some local officials were likely aware of the illegal activities and were being paid to ignore them. The breakthrough came when Dave contacted investigative journalist Patricia Santos, who had built her reputation exposing medical malpractice and pharmaceutical industry corruption. Dave's evidence of the illegal experiments at St. Mary's Hospital was exactly the kind of story that Patricia had been investigating for years. "Mr. Mitchell," Patricia said after reviewing the documentation Dave had provided, "what you've discovered here is one of the most serious medical crimes I've ever investigated. These documents prove systematic violation of patient rights and international laws governing human experimentation." But Patricia also warned Dave that exposing the illegal medical experiments would make him a target for people who had already demonstrated their willingness to violate the most basic principles of medical ethics. The people involved in these operations have millions of dollars at stake and reputations that would be destroyed if this story becomes public. They will do anything to stop you from exposing what they've been doing. Dave thought about Linda and the children, about the comfortable life they had built through his electrical contracting business, and about the dangers that his discovery might bring to his family. But he also thought about the vulnerable patients who were being tortured and possibly killed in the hidden facilities beneath one of the region's most trusted hospitals. "Patricia, if I don't expose this, who will? These people are counting on everyone being too scared or too selfish to speak up for patients who can't protect themselves." The decision to cooperate with Patricia's investigation would prove to be the most dangerous choice of Dave's life, but it would also lead to the exposure of medical crimes that had been hidden for years behind the reputation of a supposedly ethical medical institution. Call to action. Dave's situation demonstrated how skilled professionals could be forced into compromising positions when they lacked the financial independence to walk away from morally questionable work. If he had established his own successful business serving ethical clients, he wouldn't have been vulnerable to institutions that exploited workers' dependence on specific contracts. The advanced techniques and business principles in Ted's woodworking could have given him the independence to choose only projects that aligned with his values. If you're tired of being trapped in situations that compromise your principles, click here to discover how thousands of skilled professionals have built thriving businesses based on integrity rather than desperation. But Dave's immediate concern was not his future career prospects. It was ensuring that the evidence he had gathered reached authorities who could shut down the illegal medical experiments before more vulnerable patients could be harmed. Patricia's investigation had revealed that the illegal operations at St. Mary's Hospital were part of a broader network of medical research facilities that were conducting unauthorized experiments throughout the region. The hospital was just one location where pharmaceutical companies and research organizations were conducting studies that violated both federal law and international standards for human experimentation. The coordination between Dave and Patricia required extreme secrecy, as both Dr. Webb and the security personnel who were monitoring Dave had made it clear that they would not tolerate any interference with their operations. Dave's evidence packages included photographs of the hidden facilities, recordings of conversations that established the illegal nature of the medical experiments, and detailed technical documentation of the electrical systems that supported the unauthorized operations. Most importantly, Dave had obtained patient identification numbers and medical records that proved specific individuals had been subjected to experimental procedures without their consent or knowledge. The federal investigation that resulted from Dave's evidence would eventually shut down illegal medical research operations at multiple facilities and lead to the prosecution of dozens of physicians, researchers, and pharmaceutical company executives who had participated in systematic violations of patient rights. But the personal cost of Dave's decision to expose the medical crimes would be enormous, requiring him and his family to face retaliation from people who viewed his testimony as a threat to their freedom and financial interests. Thank you so much for staying with us this far in this incredible story. We truly appreciate your dedication as a viewer, and believe me, the best is yet to come. What follows will show us how Dave's courage to expose these medical horrors led to one of the most significant patient rights cases in medical history. Chapter 4. The federal investigation triggered by Dave's evidence began with a coordinated raid on St. Mary's Hospital that preserved the crime scenes before the illegal medical research operations could be shut down and evidence destroyed. Federal agents, accompanied by medical ethics investigators and patient advocacy specialists, systematically documented the hidden facilities that Dave had discovered. The raid revealed the full scope of the illegal medical experiments that had been conducted at St. Mary's Hospital. The hidden surgical suites had been used for unauthorized procedures on over 200 patients during a 3-year period, while the secret laboratories had conducted pharmaceutical testing that violated every principle of informed consent and patient safety. Most shocking was the discovery of detailed records that the hospital had maintained about their illegal research activities. The documentation revealed that the experiments had been designed to test medical procedures and pharmaceutical compounds that were too dangerous to be approved for legitimate clinical trials. Dave's role as the whistleblower who had exposed the illegal medical operations made him a crucial witness in federal prosecutions that would eventually result in criminal charges against 14 physicians, 6 pharmaceutical company executives, and 12 hospital administrators who had participated in the systematic abuse of vulnerable patients. But Dave's cooperation with federal investigators also made him a target for retaliation from people who faced prison sentences and the destruction of their professional careers as a result of his testimony. The threats against Dave's family began within days of the federal raid on St. Mary's Hospital. Anonymous phone calls warned that his wife and children would be hurt if he continued to cooperate with federal investigators. His electrical contracting business suddenly lost several major clients who cited concerns about association with controversial legal matters. Most disturbing was the campaign of intimidation directed at Linda and the children. Alex and Sophie were followed home from school by strangers who made comments about their father's irresponsible behavior and the potential consequences for families who interfered with important medical research. The psychological pressure was enormous, but Dave also understood that backing down from his cooperation with federal investigators would not ensure his family's safety. The people he was testifying against had already demonstrated their willingness to conduct illegal medical experiments on vulnerable patients, and they would not hesitate to eliminate a witness who could send them to prison. Federal prosecutors provided Dave's family with protection during the most dangerous phases of the investigation and trial preparation, but they also warned that the threats might continue for years, even after the criminal cases were resolved. "Mr. Mitchell," explained Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Rodriguez, "the people you're testifying against operated a criminal enterprise that generated millions of dollars in illegal revenue. Even after we convict them, their associates will view you as someone who cost them their freedom and their profits." The trial proceedings revealed the full horror of what had been happening in the hidden facilities beneath St. Mary's Hospital. Dave's testimony about the electrical systems that supported the illegal operations was crucial to helping juries understand how sophisticated the criminal conspiracy had been. But perhaps more importantly, Dave's decision to expose the medical crimes had led to the identification and treatment of surviving victims who had been subjected to unauthorized experiments. Federal investigators were able to locate dozens of patients who had been harmed by the illegal procedures and provide them with proper medical care and legal representation. The convictions that resulted from Dave's evidence included life sentences for Dr. Marcus Webb and 3 other physicians who had conducted the most dangerous experimental procedures. The pharmaceutical companies that had funded the illegal research paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and civil settlements to victims and their families. But the personal cost to Dave's family was substantial. The electrical contracting business that Dave had spent 2 decades building was effectively destroyed by the controversy surrounding his role in exposing the medical crimes. Even clients who supported his actions were reluctant to hire an electrician, whose work might attract unwanted attention from federal investigators or media coverage. It was during this difficult period of rebuilding his career that Dave's investment in studying advanced business development through Ted's Woodworking proved crucial to his family's survival. The comprehensive guides had taught him skills that allowed him to transition from standard electrical contracting to specialized work that commanded premium rates and attracted clients who valued both technical expertise and ethical integrity. Dave established Mitchell Electrical Consulting, specializing in electrical safety audits for medical facilities and other institutions where patient safety depended on reliable power systems. His reputation as someone who had exposed dangerous medical practices actually became an asset in attracting clients who wanted to ensure that their facilities met the highest ethical and safety standards. The success of his consulting business eventually exceeded what Dave had been earning from standard electrical contracting, proving that professionals who maintain their integrity can often build more successful careers than those who compromise their principles for short-term financial gain. Most importantly, Dave's work as an electrical safety consultant allowed him to help other medical facilities maintain the kinds of oversight and transparency that could prevent the illegal activities he had discovered at St. Mary's Hospital. Chapter 5. 5 years after exposing the illegal medical experiments at St. Mary's Hospital, Dave found himself living a life that was more meaningful and ultimately more prosperous than anything he had achieved during his years as a standard electrical contractor. His decision to speak out against medical crimes had transformed him from a tradesman into a nationally recognized expert on electrical safety in medical facilities. The federal prosecution of the St. Mary's Hospital case had led to the conviction of 32 individuals and the shutdown of illegal medical research operations at 6 different facilities throughout the region. The case had also resulted in new federal regulations requiring enhanced oversight of medical research and stronger protections for vulnerable patient populations. Dave's testimony had been crucial, not just to securing convictions, but to helping legislators and regulatory agencies understand how illegal medical operations could be hidden within legitimate healthcare institutions. His expertise in electrical systems had revealed how criminals could use technical knowledge to conceal their activities from normal oversight procedures. The personal transformation that resulted from Dave's decision to expose the medical crimes had affected every aspect of his life. His consulting business had grown to employ 8 specialists who conducted electrical safety audits and ethics compliance reviews for medical facilities throughout the country. Mitchell Electrical Consulting had become the leading firm for hospitals and research institutions that wanted to demonstrate their commitment to both technical excellence and ethical integrity. Dave's reputation as someone who had risked everything to protect vulnerable patients had become a valuable asset that attracted clients who prioritized safety and transparency over cost considerations. Linda had become a victim advocate, specializing in helping families navigate the complex legal and medical issues that arose when healthcare institutions violated patient rights. Her work grew directly from the experience of supporting other families who had been affected by the illegal medical experiments that Dave had exposed. "What we went through was terrible," Linda said during a television interview about patient advocacy. "But it also taught us that ordinary families can fight back against institutional corruption if they're willing to support each other and demand accountability from people in power." Alex, now 20 years old, had decided to study biomedical engineering, inspired by his father's example of using technical expertise to protect people from institutional abuse. He often spoke about wanting to design medical equipment that included built-in safeguards to prevent the kinds of unauthorized experiments that his father had discovered. "Dad showed me that skilled professionals have a responsibility to use their knowledge to protect people who can't protect themselves," Alex said during a college presentation about ethics in medical technology. "I want to create systems that make it impossible for hospitals to conduct secret experiments on vulnerable patients." Sophie, now 17, had become interested in investigative journalism and patient advocacy, often writing for her school newspaper about medical ethics and the importance of transparency in healthcare institutions. "My father's story taught me that exposing the truth, even when it's dangerous and difficult, is sometimes the only way to protect people who don't have anyone else speaking for them," Sophie wrote in an essay that won a national contest for young journalists. The financial success of Dave's consulting business had also allowed him to establish a foundation that provided legal assistance to families whose relatives had been victims of unauthorized medical experiments. The foundation had helped dozens of families obtain justice and compensation for medical abuse that had been hidden by institutional reputations and political connections. Dave's work as a consultant had also led to his recognition by multiple professional organizations for his contributions to medical safety and patient protection. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers had awarded him their highest honor for professional ethics, acknowledging his courage in exposing illegal activities despite personal and professional risks. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the families of patients whose lives had been saved by Dave's decision to expose the illegal medical experiments at St. Mary's Hospital. One letter from the sister of a homeless veteran who had been subjected to unauthorized surgical procedures particularly moved Dave. "Mr. Mitchell, my brother couldn't speak for himself when those doctors were experimenting on him. But your courage gave him a voice. Because of what you did, he received proper medical treatment and was able to spend his final months with dignity instead of being used as a laboratory animal." The advanced business skills Dave had developed through his study of Ted's woodworking had been crucial to his successful transition from standard electrical work to specialized consulting that commanded premium rates while serving socially important purposes. Dave's consulting firm had become a destination for other skilled tradespeople who wanted to combine technical expertise with meaningful social impact. The training programs he had developed helped electricians, engineers, and other technical professionals understand how their knowledge could be used to identify and prevent institutional abuse. "The most important lesson I've learned," Dave would tell audiences at professional conferences, "is that skilled technical professionals have unique abilities to detect when institutions are operating outside legal and ethical boundaries. We have a responsibility to use that knowledge to protect people who don't have technical expertise to protect themselves." St. Mary's Hospital had been completely restructured under new management and had implemented oversight procedures that made it impossible for illegal medical research to be conducted without detection. The hospital had also established a memorial fund for victims of the unauthorized experiments, funded by the fines and settlements paid by the individuals and companies who had participated in the illegal activities. Dave occasionally visited the hospital in his role as an electrical safety consultant, but the basement areas where he had discovered the illegal medical experiments had been completely renovated and converted into legitimate patient care facilities under full oversight and transparency. Standing in those renovated spaces, Dave often reflected on how a routine electrical service call had led to the exposure of systematic medical abuse that had affected hundreds of vulnerable patients. The decision to investigate suspicious electrical systems had revealed crimes that might otherwise have continued for years. And in his consulting office each evening, surrounded by the documentation and safety standards that his work had helped establish, Dave continued to build not just electrical safety systems, but a legacy of proving that skilled professionals who refuse to ignore institutional corruption can achieve both career success and genuine social impact. The electrician who had accidentally discovered fatal medical secrets had become the consultant who helped institutions build systems that protected the most vulnerable members of society while maintaining the highest standards of both technical excellence and ethical integrity. This story shows us that some of the institutions we trust most can hide the most heinous crimes. Dave proved that ordinary people can make a difference when they have the courage to confront corrupt systems, even when it means sacrificing everything they've built. Sometimes, saving the lives of vulnerable people requires risking our own safety. What would you do if you discovered that a hospital was abusing patients? Tell us in the comments if you would have the courage to speak out. If this story shocked you, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell for more disturbing real stories. And don't miss the next video with another story that will leave you speechless.